Pantomime, Sami Paşazade Sezai. In a dead-end street in Haseki, a three-room house stood alone, filled with an eternal silence, like a grave. It was abandoned in a state of decay and forgetfulness. A wooden board that broke off from the roof, a tile that slipped from the eaves, or a stone that crumbled from the walls would remain where it fell for years. Occasionally, an ugly old Greek woman, moving with the eerie stillness of a witch, would step outside, purchase the supplies she needed, and quickly disappear back into the house. In the small garden close to the wall stood a large tree. When the blazing July sun left this part of Istanbul exhausted in a sweltering heat, a cool breeze hidden among the tree's leaves would begin to spread, acting like a great green fan that refreshed the air and brought relief to the neighborhood. On a summer Friday around noon, a man stepped out of this house holding a bundle under his arm. After carefully and attentively closing the door, he started walking. From behind, one could see that his broad shoulders and waist were almost the same width, making his body appear stocky. He was 33 years old, with short, thick legs that struggled to carry his heavy frame in the direction he wished to go. As he wandered through the deserted streets of this remote neighborhood, lost in thought and sadness, he was actually on his way to make people laugh. He arrived in front of a building made of thin wooden planks, reinforced with supports to keep it from collapsing. A sign, written in large black letters on white paper, hung above the entrance. The famous Paskal's pantomime. Every Friday and Sunday, the renowned Paskal performs various acts and comedic plays here. Highly praised by his esteemed audience, Paskal will present new performances on stage every week. Paskal was himself. He entered his small theater, unwrapped his bundle, and put on the costume he always wore for his show. Loose white trousers like a shalwar, a pointed white hat, and white powder covering his entire face. He painted red under his frog-like black eyes. An hour later, in the midst of laughter and applause rising from minds free of burdens and hearts untouched by sorrow, he was performing his act. Paskal played the role of a man in love, sticking out his tongue as a declaration of affection and tumbling head over heels to win his beloved's heart. An act that greatly amused the audience. A man watching the play, leaning against the central pole that held up the theater's fabric ceiling, took a drag from his cigarette and said, "When Paskal sticks out his tongue, oh, that's enough to make you laugh until you faint." Most of those seated on the small stools agreed. In the audience, sitting in one of the theater's boxes, was a young woman whose innocent, childlike laughter could ease the bitterness of life. She clapped excitedly, like a little bird flapping its wings in flight, her rosy lips bright with a radiant smile. This young woman, named Eftalia, was 20 years old. She came to the theater almost every week with her elderly mother. "My dear, do you really enjoy it here?" her mother would ask. Eftalia would say that Paskal reminded her of her beloved dog that had passed away, and that at times his movements and expressions resembled a monkey she had once seen and found amusing. That day, the young woman, dressed in white linen, glowing with a magical smile, tossed flowers from her box seat to the performer she found as charming as an animal. As the flowers struck Paskal's face and chest, he clutched his heart as if mortally wounded, letting out anguished cries like a dying beast. A few minutes later, he sat down on the dirt floor behind the stage, sobbing quietly, while the audience still laughed at his act. Poor Paskal was in love with the beautiful Eftalia. This flawed body had fallen for a flawless being, yet he didn't dare tell anyone about the love he kept locked in the deepest corner of his heart. Not even the old servant with whom he had shared every sorrow since childhood. No woman had ever looked at him with admiration. No one had ever shown him affection. All that was expected of him was to make others laugh. Even now, in his moment of heartbreak and sorrow, people were laughing at him. That evening, when the performance was over, he once again took his bundle under his arm and returned home, walking timidly down the same path. Upon entering his room, he checked to see if anyone had been inside, lifted the curtain to glance at the street, and, finding it empty, began thinking about his beloved Eftalia. Why had they laughed at him so much today? He took the flowers from his chest, kissed them gently and reverently, and placed them on the highest shelf in the room. These flowers, oh, these flowers will be the death of me, he murmured. If she would just accept him once, he would fill the house with flower pots, seat his beautiful Eftalia in the corner, tell her all the strange stories he knew,